Hey folks, so this year I'm growing some Asiatic garlic, and it's usually the first one to harvest. It's usually ready a few weeks before most hardneck garlics. This is considered a weekly bolting garlic, which means doesn't normally go in bolts straight up like that. You can see that a lot of them are kind of like droopy, but these are completely ready. If you look, you can see the leaves are more than half brown or yellow, and the rule of thumb in most cases is once about half of them are turn color, you basically want to start harvesting. So I'm going to start doing that. I grew the bulbils, didn't remove them on purpose because these ones have very large bulbils to plant, and they'll produce really good size bulb the next year. So rather than just cutting the scape off and harvesting the garlic next year, from these, I think I have 25 or so. From these 25 or so next year, I could potentially have about 250, since each one of these have around 10 or so, maybe 8 to 10 bulbils. Now they used to lump in the Asiatic varieties with the turban varieties. The reason they call the turban varieties turban is this looks kind of like a turban, the umbel. But in recent times they've determined through DNA testing that Asiatic and turban garlics are not the same. Before I start harvesting the garlic, I'm going to cut the umbels off. So I cut the umbels off. I counted them as I cut them, and I have 29, it turns out. I think I planted around 30 or 31 cloves last year. I just remember it was close to 30, and maybe 2 didn't come up, I'm thinking, based on the spacing. Not sure why, but they've grown really well overall. Now it's time to harvest. Now when I harvest these, I like to use my garden fork. I actually bought this garden fork around the time I decided to start growing garlic, and it's been invaluable to me, even for growing potatoes and things like that. I think it's almost a must-have tool for a serious home gardener. So you just put a little bit of pressure, lift up like that. I usually use 2 hands to do this, but for the purpose of filming, there's one. That's pretty good size. We've had a bit of a dry spell here, so the soil's a little bit compacted. Alright, these are nice medium-sized cloves. I think the ones I planted were only slightly bigger. We've had a fairly dry spring and summer. Yeah, this one was from just a little tiny clove that I planted. I decided to take the really small ones that I'd almost throw away at the end, and I just tucked them in between corner. So this is what 30 or 31 or so heads, medium-sized heads of garlic look like. So I just tied them up like this. I'm going to let them hang for a while, and then after probably a week, I'll I'll cut the bulbs off from the stalk, and I'll let them dry I'll let them cure for a little while longer, a few more weeks anyway, and I'll check moisture, make sure everything's nice and dry to store for a long time. These Asiatic ones, I believe they don't store as long as some of the others, but I believe 5 or 6 months is pretty good. So just have another look at where I planted these. I had them in half of a bed with some other things right beside some onions. I used sort of a variation of what they call the square foot gardening Mel's mix. I think what happened though is I've got a little bit more peat moss than you're supposed to. Seems like a very peaty type mix. I'm going to try amending it with some other things. Yeah, I find it can just dry out a little too easily compared to some other variations of the mix where it holds the water pretty well. I also used straw mulch. It seemed to work great. I think I would even use a heavier amount next year. Nice, cheap, and effective mulch. It definitely kept the amount of watering that I had to do lower than it would otherwise. They say it would help by about 30%, because I did have other areas that weren't mulched, and I definitely was watering them more often. So I think I'll be sticking with the straw mulch for next year. I had relatively few weeds. That was another good thing. I did have some dill come in, but I just let this one grow since it essentially took hold late in the garlic growing cycle. But yeah, definitely not that many weeds. Well, I got plenty more garlic to come for the rest of the season. I have a big bed up there to do. So that'll be next in a few weeks. I'm going to just clean this up and I'll find something to plant in this spot for the rest of the summer.